So in this video we're going to have a slightly different approach to most approaches when breaking down the real trailer of Starfield, because we're going to primarily focus on the interface side of stuff. And we're going to primarily focus on the interface because we can, through this, try to identify some game features which are not explicitly focused on within the the most dominating stimuli within the frames. What I find particularly interesting is the information we are presented when you are using the scanner and when you are not, because it takes out and puts in different systems about the environment, so abiotic elements like temperature, gravity, and also the CO2 contents or O2 contents of the atmosphere around you. So when you're introducing a system into a game, you want to find a way to generalize this system to make it useful in many different cases, so you can build tools of this. Because you cannot really manage a game without building tools that the designers can take over and then mass produce into the production stages. So if you don't do this in pre-production, you will end up you will have a very bad time, and it's very bad for the health of a lot of people involved with the game. So by analyzing these HUD elements, we can have some idea of what kind of systems are already in the game. Another thing we have to be a bit careful about is that we cannot fully trust the GUI in every case, because there's a lot of different people involved with video games and a lot of different fingers all over it, and that includes interface. And having someone like me going through the interface at this point of development and just trying to analyze it in the way I will now is probably not something that they planned for. This game is far from released, and there can be a lot of changes in the interface and also the game systems leading towards the release date. So it's really not fair for me to sit here and give any form of criticism to how the interface of the game systems are. These can change a lot. So I'm just gonna give praise where I can see it and elaborate on the potential features we can get out of what's been shown. So with all that said, we can start looking at the video.
According to the scanners, the abandoned research facility.
So in this frame, there is definitely interesting stuff to be said about the bottom right, with the constant display of the health, the weapon and the ammunition and so on. Because it is important to be able to prime the players, especially in a game which is as complex as this, that you are able to constantly prime them for the hostile engagements. But it's not really the focus of this video, so we're going to go down to the bottom left corner instead, where we have this onion layered graphic, and we will definitely break this on further, but we can actually go a bit further ahead as well to where we see this mode, and now we see that the information inside this onion has completely changed. And on the right of the screen, where you see the weapons, you have now a cutter weapon equipped. So depending on which weapon you have equipped, or maybe some other gadgets, the information within the onion on the right side is changing. So when navigating, you can see there's a great emphasis on knowing the oxygen levels of your tank, so you don't run out of oxygen. Here we can also pay attention to the bottom left, where you see that the O2 levels, or the gauge, is depleted as the player runs, and then it refills as he stands still or doesn't do any more running. So this makes it a little bit unsure if the knowing the oxygen level actually is important when you're navigating, if it's just tied to the running. But it wouldn't really make sense to allocate so much screen space to just telling you constantly that you can run for X amount of seconds now, because your stamina, the equivalent of your stamina, is full. So I'm hoping that because the O2 levels and CO2 levels is still on the HUD when you're just walking around and not really running and depleting it and refilling it, I'm hoping that the presence of this is an indicator that there is some sort of survival aspects in handling the amount of O2 and your oxygen tanks, basically. But given this example with the running, and that's the only time we see it deplete, it doesn't really make me too optimistic about it. You also have the floating indicator of your current objective, or if it's a town, I'm not sure. And you have a fairly big symbol of the moon you're at, and also the name underneath, and more importantly, there's a compass that goes around the planet symbol. So these elements are all there to give you the essential information of your life support systems, and there's a compass to let you know which direction you're heading in. While scanning, the importance of the planet is less, so you get a smaller symbol for this, and then the name of the planet or the moon and the type of the celestial body you are at, which is a moon, is displayed bigger. And then you have the temperature, O2 levels, and then you have the gravity factor. This suggests that these abiotic factors have an importance in the scanning process or the mining process. And I think it is a pretty interesting system because it basically allows you to take out information from when it's not needed on the screen and put it in specifically into contexts when you use specific devices which are tied to performing specific tasks. So you can in effect limit a lot of the clutter on the screen. So it is basically a principle of constraint where you restrict the amount of information that is displayed on the screen to performing the exact task which you are performing. But I can imagine this is very hard to design for. You can have it one or two ways basically. You can have a situation where the design around the game activities influences the graphical user interface, or you can have the opposite direction where the graphical user interface influences the game design, the game activities designs. But because we don't know which one influenced which, we cannot really be perfectly sure if knowing the temperature of the or the oxygen levels around you is at all relative to expertly navigating the environment. Because if it ever was, then why wouldn't they put this information on the navigation mode? Because now it's hidden away in the mining mode. But we can of course make these assumptions, but we can't really be totally sure about this because again this is early and they're probably still fiddling with the systems and stuff can still be moved around. So in the next part we can have a look at how the system information is filtered around the combat system, so which information you get and which is kept back. And the following is the first encounter with a creature, and you can see for a moment it is hostile. So you see the name of the creature pop out, and also its level. Personally, I'm a bit wary about hiding this information at all times, so if you walk around the world you can't really see which level the NPCs are, so you don't really know which level they are before you engage them, but maybe this is something that is tied to some equipment you can potentially buy in, and then you can extend more information from the system. I would assume that would be the case because playing the whole game and not knowing the levels and NPCs around you would not be quite ideal. But on the other hand, I can see how this also can create some form of mystery when you're exploring all these different planets. And maybe it creates a bit more of a survivalist aspect to the experience of the game, so you're not quite sure how safe you are around these different creatures and NPCs around you. Which again would be another reason to have this device that allows you to see this in the future, in the later part of the game. So here we can have a look at what kind of system information is presented and filtered when it comes to active combat. So we can see here at the bottom left that the markers for the hostilities are actually marked in the what we can call a radar for now, at the bottom left. And when the enemy is underneath the invisible cursor in the middle of the screen, that's when the pirate name or the name of the NPC and also the level indicators are shown. So these visual elements are very big at the moment, so that's probably why they choose to just show the one underneath the cursor, because if both of them were on the screen at the same time, it would get a bit crowded. So now as the cursor moves over to the next, this is when it is revealed. We can also notice here that as this character approaches, we get a brief moment where you can see you can pickpocket this character. When the character dies, you can see you can take and transfer probably the inventory. So maybe you can take or pick up the character moving around, and then maybe you can transfer the inventory. So because of the shape of this menu, I would assume that this is tied to the D-pad on the controllers. So it seems like we have one row for pistols or single-handed weapons, you have one for shotguns, and then you have one for automatic, and then you have one for tools. We can recognize this as a tool because it looks similar to how the mining tool and the scanner tool was in the start of the video. I get some basic information about them before you actually equip them. So here we can see that we have 336 shells for this weapon. So you don't pick up weapons which are basically depleted of ammunition. So another assumption we can make here is that if they had this sort of hot swapping system, we maybe, it's not guaranteed, but we probably won't have a custom loadouts, like multiple custom loadouts. Although it is possible, but if they're going for this sort of system, then probably not. I think the best way of having a multiple loadout system with this hot swapping system as well is if also the hot swapping wheel was also tied to the custom loadout that you chose. So if they had multiple loadouts, you can have one loadout where the stats of the that you get from the equipment and the weapons and so on, are maybe more favored for melee, and then you have one for long range and so on, and then you would switch out weapons in the hot swapping wheel at the same time. But I can't really say I can think of very many games which has both of these systems at the same time. But for now I'm just going to assume that you only have this one form of loadout, so you just have to manage this one and then try to switch out equipment the slow way and just try to work with it. And that's not a bad system necessarily, it really depends on what kind of game it is and how everything around it is built up. So while we are at the topics of loadouts, we can go back into the game and we can skip these parts because these are pretty explicit already, not too much to go into. But if we go into the ship management, we can find some interesting stuff here, like you have the different stats at the bottom, and most importantly for me, it is the cargo. So it seems like you can have a big difference in the amount of cargo you can hold. 3,330, I guess this would be liter volumes of cargo. So this could potentially imply that you are able to build your ships into being trade vessels, so you would just optimize your ship to moving as much cargo as possible. It's also worth noting that he explicitly said
you can even build your own spaceships.
Ships, so it's possible that you as a player can manage many ships at once. So we can have a look at this galaxy view here. And we can see multiple instances of ship icons. And I highly doubt these are just random NPC ships, because if there's just 2 NPC ships in this galaxy, it would not be a lot of encounters. So I'm pretty sure that these ships are in some way tied to the player. It can either be player-owned ships or it can be tied to the faction he's in. And given that he also notes that you can have AI or crews in your ships, it's not super unlikely that some of these AIs can actually also fly your ships, so these ships can become trade vessels and just trade automatically between the galaxy. But it's a bit far-fetched, but there's a lot of games that does this, like the X series. So it is a tested and tried system, and it wouldn't be too hard to implement this into the game actually. Finally, we can see what kind of system information is exposed to the player during these space fights. So we can look at the bottom left of the screen here, where there's a total amount of ship power you can delegate between different modules of the ship. So you have the laser system, the ballistics, the missile systems, and then you have the engine, shield, and probably the gravity systems. So the player can basically use the D-pad, as indicated by the D-pad symbol here, to switch between the columns with left and right D-pads possibly, and then you use the up and down D-pads directions to remove and add system power to these modules. For a brief second here we can see a locking mechanism, and it takes time, it's locked over time, so we probably will be able to upgrade this component of the ship as well, so you can lock quicker. You can also see on the right screen here that you have the shield and the hull damage here. So the shield is indicated by the squiggly lines here, and then it overlaps with the number, the box number there, so it will be a strong indicator that the number is tied to the shield strength. Underneath you have the hull. We can also notice here on the screen that there's a docking option, so if you fly close enough you can potentially dock these ships. It also gives you some system information regarding the flight system, weapon system, and life support system, so I would also assume that this is the screen you will get when you attempt to board pirate ships and maybe have crew fights and so on. So in this part they actually briefly show us a couple of different ship variations. Here's one which is primarily a cargo ship. So that was all the elements that I felt like focusing on in this video regarding the interface. Again, it is a bit early to take these observations as absolute assurances that these features will be in the game, but I think it gives us a little bit of a hunch where this game can be headed in terms of functionality and what we can do as a player. So additionally, there were some observations that I did during the recording of this video which did not really fit totally into the focus of the video here, so I'm probably going to make another one as a follow-up to this. But until then, goodbye for now.